the last one was like almost 30 minutes in length. So I don't know if you want to keep it brief. All right, this is episode 7 of Farm to Markets, where we talk about everything from farms to stock markets. Today, we're talking about the new cryptocurrency legislation, Apple scanning phones, and sustainable versus traditional farming. On Tuesday, the U.S. Senate passed the long-awaited bipartisan infrastructure bill, which included provision to toughen the tax enforcement on cryptocurrency transactions. The cryptocurrency industry opposed provisions, saying that the legislation was written too broadly. Alex, can you tell us what exactly the crypto industry didn't like and what you think this means for the crypto industry as a whole?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, this is part of the bigger $1 trillion infrastructure bill. The bill that just passed the Senate that's gone back to the House includes language in it that defines brokers in the cryptocurrency space as and I have the quote here, responsible for and regularly providing any service effectuating transfers of digital assets on behalf of another person. The crypto industry doesn't like this because it's a very broad statement. And in theory, anyways, this covers Bitcoin miners, software developers who deal with crypto exchanges, things like that. These people would have to, or these organizations would have to start providing names and addresses for their customers to the government for tax purposes. And in many cases, their clients or customers are anonymous, so they'd have to start collecting information they don't have. They don't particularly care for this. A revision of the definitions that would tighten that failed to pass in the Senate, and now in the House. The crypto industry is trying to get this corrected. Opponents say that this will really hurt the emerging crypto industry in the United States. Detractors are saying that they're looking to close tax loopholes, which, there's a lot of effectively capital gains taxes on crypto that aren't being paid. So this is what that fight is over.
And Joe, what do you think?
Well, if you think of it in terms of your checkbook, imagine every time you bought or sold something, it was a taxable event. That's kind of what's going to take place, because for a lot of these Bitcoin traders who are helping with transactions, is you're converting your Bitcoins into dollars and vice versa. So I think this is really going to slow down the growth of the Bitcoin concept, or the cryptocurrency concept. Secondly, one of the real selling points of cryptocurrency was the ability to have private transactions without a bunch of other people knowing what's going on. Well, now that you have to report your transactions to the IRS, imagine all the information that the federal government could use on how you're spending your money. Which are you giving money to a Democrat via cryptocurrency, or are you giving money to a Republican? Well, all of that information is now going to be known by the IRS. I think it's like throwing cold water in the face of the whole industry.
Okay. Drew?
I think my dad and Alex summed it up pretty well. It's definitely going to throw a wrench in what the goals of cryptocurrency or what they were all about. But it's also easy to pontificate about whether cryptocurrency should be taxed or shouldn't be taxed. I just kind of like to go back to the basics and talk about what it means. Cryptocurrency now is basically property in the eyes of the IRS. That means it's a capital asset. Whenever you own or you purchase a capital asset, at that price, if it increases, you're going to owe capital gains taxes on that. So at this point, the IRS has already said it. They've established it on their website. Cryptocurrency is taxable as a capital asset. So going forward, at least where we're sitting, we're just going to treat it the same like any other asset if you hold cryptocurrency. One is to try to hold it. If it's a short-term capital gain, hold it long enough to become a long-term capital gain to reduce the tax burden. Two, you could use tax loss harvesting strategies by selling losing assets to offset capital gains. Another thing, you could sell it in a low-income year. Under current tax law, if you're in the 12% tax bracket or lower, you won't pay any long-term capital gains taxes. And another thing, you can look for ways to reduce your taxable income. So now that it is taxable and you're responsible for those capital gains taxes, focus on minimizing the tax burden.
And Alex, you did a good job explaining it, but did you want to give us your 2 cents or your 2 Bitcoins worth of an opinion here?
Well, I think this is the beginning of the federal government, at least in the United States, starting the crackdown that I think is inevitable on cryptocurrencies around the world. Many other countries have already taken steps like this and far beyond, especially as large central banks are getting into the digital currency market themselves, especially for the US dollar. US dollar's value is by and large predicated on it being unassailable as the currency of choice for most global transactions. And I think long-term, there is absolutely no way the federal government is going to allow independent currencies to threaten its position. So I think this is the opening act in that play that's about to happen.
A couple of things I will point out is that one, with this particular piece of legislation, is that even though the Senate did not pass the revision that the cryptocurrency or the crypto industry wanted, it doesn't sound like there's like a huge opposition to excluding developers and miners from the legislation. It just sounds like it's getting held up for other reasons, like budget reasons and other stuff. But from what I've read, is that there isn't a whole lot of opposition to actually excluding those people from the original piece of legislation. Secondly, is that I don't think there's anybody, even people who are very pro crypto, who thought they were ever going to escape taxation in cryptocurrency. I don't think anybody had it in their mind that just because they thought crypto was going to be the new world currency, that the government was just going to leave them alone. In fact, actually, when I was looking on Coinbase today, there's actually a couple articles by some of their contributors that are bragging that they finally got recognized by the U.S. government as a legitimate currency, and in their eyes, this is them being legitimized. And I don't hold that opinion. I don't think just because the government's going to set rules on taxation, on taxing your product, I don't think that makes you legitimate or illegitimate. But you know, some pro cryptocurrency advocates are kind of basically saying that this is like this is like a huge milestone for them, and I don't really think that's the case either. So the headlines that you've been seeing that we're cracking down on cryptocurrency, really, I mean, there's already been some framework in place where the IRS has been asking you if you have crypto gains or cryptocurrency capital gains or not. And then also, I think most people saw the writing on the wall that the government was going to eventually tax them anyways. So any other thoughts before we move on this one?
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at cryptocurrency. One, to Drew's point, it's an investment, a capital asset. Or 2, it's a medium of exchange. And I think for the people who are going to treat it like a investment, a capital asset, it's no big deal. But for the people who treat it like a medium exchange, which was the original purpose of cryptocurrency, I think that people are going to come to the conclusion that, well, heck, I might as well just electronically transfer cash as opposed to cryptocurrency and have to go through all this complexity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess I'm shocked that people thought this was going to go by untaxed or unnoticed by the U.S. government.
Now, there's one question I have, and one of you guys might know the answer to this, is are the capital gains triggered when you actually sell the crypto or when you exchange the crypto? Because if you use it as a medium of an exchange, say you get paid your paycheck in crypto and then you go buy groceries and you never sell, period, then there shouldn't be any tax burden as long as you don't sell it.
You'd be lucky, Drew, if that was the case. But in most cases, you get paid in crypto. Then those different trading platforms convert your crypto into dollars so that your grocery store will give you food. And at that point, that is a triggering event for capital gains.
But to Drew's point is that why don't you take if you have a bunch of embedded capital gains, why don't you go buy a Tesla and then just give Elon Musk your Bitcoins and then go sell your Tesla on the secondary market and then avoid paying capital gains altogether.
Arbitrage.
You can do that or not. I don't know if there's any, I don't know if you can do that or not, but.
Make sure you throw up that we don't give tax advice disclaimer on that comment.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah, I'm not telling anybody to do this, but I'm just saying it might be something to look into. All right, moving on. earlier this month, Apple announced a new technology that is going to scan every Apple user's phone. And essentially by phone, I mean they're going to scan their photos and their iMessages for illegal pictures and content. Any illegal material found in the phone will be turned over to the proper authorities by Apple. Will Cathcart, who's in charge of Facebook's WhatsApp, stated that he thinks what Apple is doing is very concerning, and he would rather see companies utilize user reports because they preserve user privacy. Joe, I can tell by looking at you that you're not an iPhone user, but are you concerned that Apple is going to start scanning phones?
Because I'm not an Apple aficionado, I don't really care personally. But as a citizen, the idea that Apple could reach into somebody's pocket and get into their private property and start looking around for illegal material is somewhat concerning. Now, it sounds rather benevolent that they're looking for child sexual abuse material, but illegal material is a pretty broad thing. So and we have seen in the last 2 election cycles that any sort of a political affiliation you have that the mainstream media doesn't like is going to come public at some point. Who you give money to in terms of nonprofits will come back to haunt you at some point, particularly if you're a CEO or a CFO of a large Fortune 500 company or a political official.
Okay, Alex, what do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things that I think is interesting about this. Number one, most companies, at least in big tech, have been doing this to a certain extent since the late 2000s. So, for example, Google has been scanning all of its platforms. Facebook has, Microsoft has, but the big difference is it's been scanning its own servers. So if you were uploading something to Facebook, Facebook scans its server for that material and then may report that to the proper authorities. Now, like Joe is saying, this is happening on your personal device. In the US, that's not quite as concerning right now. I'd be more concerned if I was living in a place like the UK or Canada, where you have hate speech laws. Is Microsoft or Apple or Facebook going to follow the lead of Apple, or is Apple going to be reporting, offensive memes now that you have saved on your phone to the UK authorities because they are, racially insensitive or whatever? I think for now, that's the bigger concern. Longer term, I do think this is a big concern for everybody.
Drew?
I'm not an Apple user either, so personally, I don't really care. I do find it disturbing, the whole Big Brother move, being able to infringe on people's privacy like that. But another part of me also let them do what they want. If you don't like it, don't give Apple a vote to do it. Don't buy an Apple product anymore. Use a Samsung Galaxy or find something else. There's always going to be a market to replace it if enough people don't want it. Or don't like it. The other thing is, from what I understand, the child sexual abuse material scanning only actually happens on the iCloud for photos that are uploaded to the cloud. And I think you can actually turn that setting off. So if your photos are stored on your phone and are untethered from the cloud, they can't scan them, period. So there are some options to go around this.
Yeah, I guess you guys touched on 2 points. Is that one, Drew's absolutely right, is that you have other options. So, as somebody who does use an Apple phone, I guess I have the option to go and use a Google, like an Android phone. But to Alex's point is that they've been scanning, Google's been scanning emails, Facebook scans a bunch of material. Other than the fact that they're looking for, fairly specific things using photos, it's not really new. I mean, Alexa, they say they're not listening in conversations, but it sounds like they have a lot of data that says otherwise. So, and yeah, like to Drew's point is that if Apple chooses to do this, I'm completely comfortable with Apple choosing to do that. Right now there's other choices. You could go buy a BlackBerry and or the market will create another market for people who don't want people scanning their phones and that kind of stuff. But to Alex's point, the real concern isn't so much Google looking for photos. It's more so is that if you're using an iPhone in China, is the Chinese government going to start pressuring Apple to start looking for people who are not, who are not supportive of the current administration? And then they're going to start using that data to target people for political purposes. And that is a real issue, is that if you're in China. But right now, scanning people's like emails and their data, frankly, I think it's been around a while, and it doesn't really concern me as an Apple user. Okay, so we'll go on to the last one here, is that we're going to talk about sustainable farming versus traditional farming. And there is a huge dearth of information out there on both these topics. And I don't even own a Carhartt jacket. So I'm going to defer to Drew here, and he maybe give us a rundown on a little bit on what's going on here and what the difference is.
Is that the price of admission to be able to talk about organic versus traditional farming? Is
that's what I've heard.
All right. So, yeah. So from what I understand, I'm no expert by any means, but the essential difference between organic and non-organic or conventional farming is that conventional farming uses chemicals such as pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers to fight pests and weeds, and also give plants their nutrients. Whereas organic farming relies on pure natural principles like biodiversity and composting to produce their crops. I'm not overly dogmatic about any method in particular. I do embrace both in my lifestyle. Personally, I try to farm organically. In my garden, stay away from chemicals and pesticides and herbicides, fertilize it with waste from our rabbits. My dad will tell you, he grows worms, much like Harry and Lloyd in Dumb and Dumber. He has a worm farm and uses the worm castings to fertilize the plants. So I think that's great. It's very fun practice to do. But my pocketbook much prefers conventional farming. It's cheaper. If non-organic food was the same price as organic food, I would certainly buy organic food, but the labor costs and the production costs and the supply of non-organic food are just night and day from organic food. So I usually buy non-organic produce at the market. Kind of like if a filet mignon was the same price as ground chuck, I'd buy filet mignon, but we live in a world with different choices.
Joe?
Well, personally, I try to farm organically and sustainably, primarily because it's my property, and I care very much about the quality and the value of the soil. The problem with chemical fertilizers and chemical herbicides and pesticides is that over time, they tend to ruin the soil, whereas you tend to get much more sustainable results when you farm organically. To that point, it's hard work, and that's why it's so much more expensive than buying chemical farming products. If I'm going to go to the grocery store and buy food, I'll probably buy whatever's cheapest, which more than likely has been done through chemical farming. But if I'm going to grow the food myself, I generally choose to farm organically.
Okay. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I heard this joke a long time ago about the difference between the two, and it's that organic farming is feeding hundreds with land that could be used to feed thousands. That being said, I think there's a place for both. Industrial farming, is really a technological marvel of the modern world. There's pushing 8 billion people on the planet, and they've got to eat. And, it's really not going to happen when much of the world is food and, calorie importers. People growing heirloom tomatoes in the backyard is not going to feed billions of people effectively. That being said, I tend to prefer buying things that are more sustainably grown or animals that are more sustainably raised. But with as many people as there are in the world, and everybody's got to eat, there really is, I think, room for both. So I don't think it's particularly helpful to demonize industrial farming when so many people rely on it to be fed. But I understand the preference for organic.
Yeah, and I agree with most of that. And that I also think I'd clarify too is that I don't think organic farming is strictly the not using chemicals. I think it also includes like crop rotations and like the way you plant it, like cover crops and a bunch of different other type of crop. I think, right? I mean, am I wrong? So is that, I guess?
Well, we've done a pretty poor job of defining our terms between organic and sustainable traditional chemical farming. But the way I look at it is that when you put organic material on your farm, it's like feeding it food. When you put chemical and fertilizers on your farm, it's like giving it vitamins and anabolic steroids. So you'll tend to get way better short-term results from the commercial chemical farming. But over time, I just think it's healthier for the land if you tend to err on the side of doing it organically.
Okay. And so, for me, I have a tiny garden and we just basically put the seeds in the ground, watered it, and then vegetables came up. But to Alex's point is that that fed my family for like maybe like a week. And now it's pretty much all gone. So in order to like actually have like a salad every day, I mean, I'd have to plant a ton of lettuce and carrots and tomatoes. I'd probably have to dig up my entire backyard and make it there. So yeah, to Alex's point is that you're right. There's tons of people in the world and they all need to eat. And one of the problems is that, some parts of the world, there isn't like I forget the term they use, but they don't have a reliable source of food sometimes because they can't grow enough of it. So what do you do is that, and it seems like some of this conventional farming has solved a lot of those issues. So I don't know if you can actually pick one or the other, but
I think you need yourself some credit.
Well, I would say, Tom, that one way you can feed your family is to adopt 2 trays and stick them in our indoor garden there in the break room at the office during the wintertime. And I would argue that you could feed your family enough vegetables with 2 trays over the winter and do it in a sustainable fashion.
You think the trays that we have in the break room would feed a family of almost 5 now for winter?
Yes.
Like 3 meals a day?
Well, no, but you're not getting all of your food from your garden, from the farmer anyway. You're getting, but if with your chickens and if you had a couple of rabbits and you had a couple of milking goats, you could.
Yeah.
But my earlier point is the reason why people don't do it because it's work.
Yeah.
You actually have to do it.
Yeah, my day job gets in the way of that.
Well, from what you told me earlier this year, Tom, you accidentally grew tomatoes in your garage. So
that did happen, yes.
It might not be as much work as you think.
Yeah, I don't know what the likelihood of that actually happening again is, but it was pretty magical. Okay, anything else before we shut this one off?
No, I don't think so.